Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
I am told while we are at Indy here and every team is in Indy, Derek Carr also headed to Indy. Sources say he is expected to meet with a handful of teams here in Indianapolis as he re-kickstarts his free agent process. I would expect him to sign somewhere. I know there are several interested teams before free agency begins, kind of giving him a leg up on everyone else. He's already met with the Saints, already met with the Jets. I know there's some real interest there, so that is expected to continue here in Indy.
Was Ian Rappaport of NFL Media talking about Derek Carr, and that was as the Combine, teams were assembling and gathering at the Combine in Indianapolis, which of course is going on this week. And then Wednesday, Rappaport followed up that report with this one. Derek Carr did meet with the Saints and the Panthers yesterday, meaning Tuesday, with Carolina owner David Tepper joining the meeting in Indy. So the owner of the Panthers joined that meeting. Today, Wednesday, Jets brass will meet with Carr, including owner Woody Johnson. You know, Carr also met previously with Saints owner Gail Benson. So we kind of know a little bit of the history here, right? And I don't want to become redundant with the Derek Carr conversation. So I understand that fatigue with this conversation could set in. That's not my intention. My intention is to talk about it as the story advances, which is something we say here all the time. As the story advances, we'll talk about it. And I do feel like Derek Carr going to Indy, meeting with the owners of both the Carolina Panthers and the New York Jets is a pretty significant advancement. I mean, he took the visit to New Orleans. We know all that. We know there's interest. The Saints had the framework of a deal reportedly in place to trade for Derek Carr. Thank God he waived it, or he wouldn't waive his no trade clause. But my inclination, the more I keep looking at the Derek Carr situation, is that Derek Carr does not want the Saints. The Saints want Derek Carr, but Derek Carr does not want the Saints. It's the bird in hand, but he's looking around for a better bird. Rappaport also had this part of the report about what Carr is looking for here with his next destination.
You know, there's also been some discussion about his price tag. Here's what I'm told. This is about fit. I know price will come up. Derek Carr has not had any substantial discussions about price or value with any of these teams. It has been all about fit. That is the most important thing, and we will see, perhaps shortly, where he lands.
I respect Ian Rappaport, the report. They're saying it's not about price, it's about fit. That's a pretty good indicator that he's not getting his price. As a matter of fact, hat tip to Nick Underhill, who I think shared this on Twitter over the weekend. It was Diana Rossini who first reported Derek Carr's number of $35 million. It was what he was seeking. And the fact that that number leaked out kind of tells you that he ain't getting that number. So it's easy to say it's more about fit than money when the money ain't there. I mean, the reason the Raiders cut him was they were not going to pay him that money. Ultimately, the reason why I and many others were adamantly opposed to the Saints trading for Carr was because you were not only trading for the player, you were trading for a contract that was going to pay him in the mid-30s this year and then in the 40s the next 2 years. That would have been absurd for a quarterback that's approaching his middle 30s and is clearly declining. So it's easy to say it's not about money, it's about fit when nobody's willing to pay you the money that you want, and that seems to be the case right now for Derek Carr. We mentioned that Carr met Wednesday with the Panthers and the Jets. Jets GM Joe Douglas had this to say about their meeting with Carr.
I can tell you that was a fantastic visit. We really enjoyed spending time with him. Obviously, he's the only quarterback that I can really shed any light on for you guys, since he's the only quarterback that's a free agent. But I can say that he left a strong impression with everybody. And so obviously we're going to be exploring the veteran quarterback market this offseason, and we're going to look at every available option. We feel like when it's time to make the right decision, whenever their process, we're going to make the best decision for the Jets.
With all of that said, Field Yates from ESPN, who does a really good job, used sort of his Rolodex, what he knows about certain situations, to make educated guesses on who he feels will be every team's starting quarterback in the NFL in 2023. And he does, by the way, have Derek Carr as the starting quarterback, as a starting quarterback in the NFC South. Just not with the New Orleans Saints. Field Yates has Derek Carr being the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. I get it that this is just one man's opinion, educated opinion, as he's putting all this together. And there was a report today that the Panthers are going to engage in conversations with Sam Darnold about bringing him back, and it's fine. I mean, it's okay. I would assume you would do that. You have to have options. But this does sort of underscore my feeling that Carr is looking for a better option. Carr could have been in New Orleans if he wanted to be. The Saints had the framework of a deal done. The Raiders would have taken anything for Carr as opposed to just letting him walk for nothing. And that didn't happen. So it's very clear that Carr is longing for other situations. Now, why this is interesting with the Field Yates piece is as he goes through the starting quarterbacks, some of them are known, like returning starters. Kyler Murray in Arizona, Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. He says Lamar Jackson going back to Baltimore. Of course, Josh Allen in Buffalo, Justin Fields in Chicago, Burrow in Cincy. A lot of them you know, right? It gets interesting where he starts looking at where you're going to have turnover. And he mentioned some turning to incumbents already on the roster. He's projecting Kyle Trask to be the starter in Tampa. Sam Howell to be the starter in Washington. And then there's the playing the veteran quarterback roulette game where he has Derek Carr going to Carolina. So if Derek Carr goes to Carolina, what does that mean for New Orleans? This is where it's probably surprising and maybe a bit disappointing to a lot of Saints fans. Field Yates projects the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints in 2023, Baker Mayfield. He writes, the Saints were the first known Carr suitor, hosting him on his loan visit before his release from Las Vegas. That visit was strong enough indication of interest, but since a trade didn't materialize, competition for Carr's services comes into play. Though he had plenty of rough stretches over his career, Mayfield showed well in a small sample size with the Rams late last season. He's an imperfect player, but I believe quarterback context matters when put in a system with capable coaching, competent playmakers, and savvy game planning. Mayfield can help you win. Jameis Winston is under contract, but he was replaced by Andy Dalton, who is now a free agent. So all that is true. Field Yates projecting Baker Mayfield will be the starting quarterback for the Saints. Let me tell you why I love it and why I hate it. Why I hate it, ultimately, is it's Baker Mayfield, and I don't think he's a really great player. And I think if you have Baker Mayfield as your quarterback, you have a younger version of Andy Dalton who just has a low ceiling. You're just tapped. Why I love it, first and foremost, I think it's affordable. Baker, this past year, in 2022, was under contract for $4.8 million. That's about a third of Jameis's deal, right? It's around what they gave Andy Dalton. Would you rather Andy Dalton at 36 years old or Baker Mayfield at 27 at $4 million? That sounds good to me. Because right now, again, what I'm looking at from a Saints perspective is not how do they win a championship in 2023. It's how do they get themselves back into a position where they're competing for championships again. And I don't believe that's by signing Derek Carr to a $30+ million a year contract. I think that would be only exacerbating your cap issues. You bring in Baker Mayfield at $4 million. Okay. The other reason I love the idea of Baker Mayfield is, or fill in the blank common to Baker Mayfield, is you're not going into the season with only Baker Mayfield. That almost guarantees you are drafting a quarterback, which I, and I think many of you hope, would be Hendon Hooker. So if you sign Baker, if you sign Derek Carr, you ain't drafting a quarterback. If you sign Derek Carr to a 4 or 5 year deal, whatever it may be, at $30 million, just ballpark it what everybody's saying around that number, $25, $30, $35 million a year, you're not drafting a quarterback as well. Like, if you sign Baker Mayfield, you're drafting a quarterback. And that's the path I think the Saints need to go, so I would love to see it transpire that way. I'm almost willing to say, okay, I'll concede 2023 because it's not going to be a championship year. It's going to be whatever it is. Draft really well, get some young guys' talent, and look ahead to the future for at quarterback and have somebody that can bridge that gap, and maybe it's Baker. Look, kind of like what Atlanta did this past year. They brought in Marcus Mariota. They drafted Desmond Ridder. Mariota started 13 games. By the end of the year, Ridder was the starter. Now Mariota's gone. It's Ridder's job. Will he thrive? Will he sail or sink? I don't know, but they're taking that chance. So good for them. They're closer to winning than the Saints are because they have a guy that could be the guy. The Saints don't. By the way, if you're wondering, Field Yates projects Jimmy Garoppolo to the Jets. He projects Aaron Rodgers to go back to Green Bay for whatever that's worth. And then some draft, like the Texans taking C.J. Stroud, the Colts getting Bryce Young, Will Levis going to the Raiders. So some of those. There's one other piece here that I was. It's just an interesting maybe parallel to what happened in the Saints' history in the past. I alluded to the fact that I think while the Saints want Derek Carr, I don't think Derek Carr wants the Saints. It's not his primary choice. It's not his primary destination. Probably because he's a guy in his mid-30s who realizes his years left in the league are fleeting, and he wants to go somewhere where he can win, and that's probably not New Orleans. So it's not exactly the same, but it reminded me a lot of 2006 when Sean Payton and Drew Brees both came to New Orleans in the same year. Neither of them wanted New Orleans. Now, New Orleans was a dramatically different situation in 2006. They were coming off the vagabond season after Katrina. We all know the history. Didn't even know if the team was going to come back to New Orleans. Didn't know if the city was going to come back at that point. And Sean Payton, as he's written in his book and talked about openly, wanted the Green Bay job. He didn't get it. Sean Payton wanted the Green Bay job. Ultimately, Mike McCarthy got that job. And Sean Payton took the Saints job. Drew Brees didn't want to come to New Orleans. Drew Brees wanted to go to Miami. And we all know what happened. He didn't get physically cleared by their doctors, by their medical team, so he ended up in New Orleans. So, and we talked about Reggie Bush as well, who did not want to come to New Orleans and had his representation tell Sean Payton, don't draft Reggie. And Sean, sort of famously told him, F you, and hung up the phone. Like, a lot of that came together in 2006 with guys that didn't want to be here. So maybe there's some synergies there with Carr, history kind of repeating itself, a guy who doesn't want to be here, but maybe he comes here and it works. I'm skeptical of that, but it's just an interesting storyline that may be worth keeping an eye on as it parallels what did happen here in the Saints' greatest era. But in any event, Field Yates projecting Baker Mayfield to be the Saints' starting quarterback, something that I would honestly prefer over Derek Carr. It doesn't make you better in 2023, but financially and competitively, it lays the groundwork to be better beyond 2023, in my opinion. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.